Hello, all, and welcome back to the Pipe Cottage. Today, I have a very, very special guest with me, Jeff Putnam. And he is a recent convert to the Catholic Church, and he is, in fact, a pipe smoker. And I reached out to him because we have a mutual friend, Mr. George Bruno. And many of you know that I have mentioned Bruno on my channel in the past, and I'm a great fan of his. But George told me about Jeff, and I looked up Jeff's content. He's very active on Substack, and he is an excellent, profoundly excellent writer. And he's a recent convert to the Catholic Church. And so we're going to talk for the next 30, 45 minutes about his story, about his journey. And so, Jeff, it's a privilege and an honor to have you on the Pipe Cottage channel today.
Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, can't say enough nice things about George. He's a great guy.
Well, Jeff, what I first want to tell our audience about, because I know that probably 75 to 80% of the people who follow the Pipe Cottage channel are Catholic. And probably only half of the people who actually follow the Pipe Cottage channel are pipe smokers. They follow this channel for a various number of reasons. And so I think that people would be interested more in your story. You were recently confirmed in the Catholic Church. And so what I would like to hear from you is maybe a few minutes of your story, where you came to understand the Catholic Church and how you came to actually be confirmed maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yeah. So most people know I grew up here in South Carolina, kind of like yourself. And I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday evenings there, 3 times a week. And that lasted about 17 years, about the time I joined the U.S. Army. And I just kind of fell off from it altogether. I met my wife while I was in the Army, and she was born and raised Catholic, but she also was never confirmed. It's kind of a running joke that we have that she's probably destined to be Catholic, being a Hispanic woman who grew up in New England. It's like the double whammy of Catholic influences there. But it just, I don't know, I never felt like I believed in anything. Growing up where people are waving their hands in church and beautiful singing and all this other, but I always felt like I was missing out on that thing that made me feel it the way they were. And so I never became an atheist, but I guess you could say I was a doubtful agnostic. And then a couple of years went by, and that kind of transformed into a relativistic kind of view when it came to religion. That whole utilitarian thing. All religions are true. If you look at them all at the same, it's kind of the same moral. Just don't be a jerk, be a good person kind of thing. And that was enough for me. Well, fast forward a total of, call it 26, 20, 25, 26 years. I was working on a book because, as you mentioned, I am a writer. I was working on a book with a client of mine, and he's also a good friend, but he's a Protestant. And the book was about esto vir, Latin for be a man. And it's, according to the story, one of the last things that King David said to Solomon before he passed away, be a man. And it was an 18-month project, which meant I had 18 months of Bible study, so to speak, and very long and deep conversations with the author, whose name is on the book. My name is in the book, but not on it. I'm just acknowledged. So it's not my personal work. That was a co-writing and editing role for me that day. But it was kind of a slow burn thing where about 12, 13 months into the 18-month project, I started getting this feeling, this pull to ask more questions. Because I was completely fine for, the most part when it came to, I am what I am. I was even a practicing pagan. went deep dive into Norse mythology and all that other. But I started feeling that pull, like I said. And I remember sitting out there on my patio, and I said a prayer for the first time in a couple of decades. It was very simple. It was, God, I don't even know if you're there. I don't know if you're listening. And I'm not going to be good at this. But if you are there, I'd appreciate it if you let me know. A couple of weeks went by, and the feeling that I had and that pull I had never really went away. And a good friend of mine who is a Catholic convert, he's actually the godparents, him and his wife are godparents to my children. He had been slowly poking the Catholic stick at me a little bit, for the majority of the last 5 years that we've been friends. And I was asking him, I'm considering becoming Catholic. What kind of advice can you give? And he goes, well, it doesn't really matter if you're going to a TLM mass or you're going to a Novus Ordo mass, but if you find a parish near you that offers the TLM, chances are it's a good parish. You won't run into any of those progressive Catholics, to keep the language muted there a little bit. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. So I started Googling. I found my home parish now, 35, 45-minute drive, but it's the home of the TLM and the deanery. Okay, let's go check it out. Told my wife, told my kids, because my wife, again, baptized Catholic, never confirmed, and she was just kind of lapsed. And I just told my wife and kids, next Sunday we're all going to go to mass. So I walked into mass that following Sunday. Was May 8th, 2000. It was the 7th or the 8th, 2003. Sorry, 2023. And sat down. I had one foot out of the pew, just waiting for something that didn't jive right, because living with a woman who was raised Catholic, I knew the basics of Catholicism, and I knew what was going to be, I just put it frankly, woke. And if that was going to be the case, I wasn't going to make a scene, but I was going to politely excuse myself and my family. And I never left. By the end of the mass, I was dead convinced, and when I walked out of there, I felt like something profound had just happened. It was an experience that I'd never felt before, that I never felt in any Protestant churches that I've gone to. And I was convinced right then that, where do I sign? Baptize me, confirm me, do it all right now. I was all in from that point, and haven't missed a single mass since then.
Well,
I was originally, go ahead.
let me interject here. So you spoke about, so you are a father of how many children?
9.
You have 9 children. Well, that's
8 boys and 1 girl.
good. That's a blessing from the Lord. So
It is.
why did you think that you were being drawn to the Catholic Church rather than Protestant denominations? Why
I've
did
grown up in the Protestants.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd gone to one Catholic mass with one Catholic friend when I was in high school. And it was just because his dad was Catholic and his mom was Protestant.
So you did an interview with George Bruno. How long ago was that? Like 3 or 4 years?
Oh, I would say 2020, 4 years.
Yeah. So what has changed in the meantime? How has Jeff Putnam become a different man from the time that you went on George Bruno's show and from to where you are now on the Pipe Cottage? What has changed in the interval?
Some things obviously stayed the same. I'm still the same man that I am. I've grown, I've matured, I've dropped a lot of the pride that was keeping me from actually being willing to submit to God. A lot of it was, well, why should I get on my knees? Why can't I just stand? And most of that was arrogance and closed-mindedness to the thing. And while I'm trying to appear open-minded, mind you, I was like I said, kind of a utilitarian relativistic person when it came to faith. If you don't bother me about mine or my absence of, I won't bother you about yours. I'm not going to disrespect your faith. You're going to have to respect my absence of faith, kind of thing.
So
But
what is your life? What does your life look like now? What do you do? What is your job? What do you see your purpose and your vision as being? What's your purpose and what's your vision?
well, I think my purpose is the same as any man's. We're charged with providing for our families, taking care of those that depend on us to take care of. As a Catholic, I'm obligated to evangelize and spread the faith. I'm obligated to live for Christ and try to align my will with his. It's, that's as far as I can say is my ultimate purpose is to turn my children into the kind of people that Christ wants them to be and help lead them. But, as far as my job, I started my own company back in 2018. It was a beard grooming product company. Sold that recently last September because my true calling I felt like was writing, because I've been doing that kind of half and half while owning that company.
Right.
And that's what I do every day. I come right in here to this desk about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I sit here and write till 3, 4 in the afternoon, mostly for various clients, because my main bread and butter is ghostwriting for people who want a book in their name but don't have the time or the discipline or even the writing skill to write their own book. So
Well, I can
I do
understand that.
for
Some of the most important writers I have ever known have been involved with ghostwriting, and so that's not a bad way to make some money. But what do you think is the future? I mean, let's think about the nature of Catholicism in the United States right now. My own parents are adamantly anti-Catholic, and I was raised in the South. And in certain parts of the South, there is still, it's almost as if anti-Catholicism is the only prejudice that's still acceptable. And so, have you encountered any of this with your conversion to the Catholic Church? Have you encountered any type of family chastisement or any type of really public chastisement from people who pay attention to your content? Do you have a story about that?
From my family, no, because as anti-Catholic as they are, I've always been the black sheep of the family. I haven't spoken to my biological family outside of my own children in getting close to a decade now. But then the black sheep, because I'm the only one that seems to be financially stable. I'm the only one that doesn't have a penchant for getting sucked into random family drama. So I cut myself off from that. And life's been pretty good in that regard. I don't wish any of them any ill will, of course. I want nothing but the best for them, and I still love them. But they aren't compatible with peace. So I alienated myself from them in that regard. But public stuff, online, oh, it's all day long, every day. I'm twisted scripture. I'm worshiping statues. I'm a cannibal, the whole thing. But to be frank, I attribute most of that to low IQ takes. Catholicism is not something that when you try to really get into understanding the theology, there's a reason we have CCD and RCIA. It's not like, oh, you can come in and proclaim, yeah, I want to be Catholic. You get baptized, you get confirmed, you get to partake in the Eucharist. We have to really understand it. And some of the concepts are difficult to understand. So I think most of the anti-Catholic rhetoric that I've seen on social media is from people who aren't smart enough to know they're not smart enough to understand it. And I know that sounds kind of crass, but the evidence is there. There's a lot of room temperature IQ takes.
Well, sir, I watched your interview with, and I will admit, the only exposure I had to you was through George Bruno. He sent me a link to the interview you did with him, and you are a completely 180 different person now compared to what I saw in that interview. You have joy, you have peace, you have the light of Christ in your eyes and in your voice. And
Appreciate that.
that's what we hope for everybody who is in a place where they are not sure what tomorrow is going to bring. One of the main reasons why I started the Pipe Cottage brand is I wanted people to realize that smoking a pipe should bring you to a place of peace and contemplation. And it has exploded into something far different. And I think the same thing is happening to you. You are reaching an audience of people who are interested in learning more about how to have a life filled with joy and filled with peace. And so I commend you for the fantastic work that you've been doing. And so for people who want to find your work, your writing, where can they find that?
My website, which is just a simple Substack, it's CatholicConvertBlog.com. On social media, I'm fairly easy to find. I'm only active on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. It's at the Jeff Putnam, exactly as it says my name here. But no, I appreciate that. I do feel more at peace. I do feel joyful. I don't feel like every day is a drag. And it has been a profound difference. Me seeing that you stating that, I'm a completely different person now. It's probably one of those things where I don't take a lot of notice of it simply because I'm too close. It could be something along those lines, but I do appreciate you saying those things.
Well, sir, and I think there is a major transformation in your life. Because I watched the videos from you before conversion to the Catholic Church, and I've seen your work since conversion to the Catholic Church. And I think that you want people to see the love and the peace and the joy in your work that can only be found through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that is so important. That is vastly important to me. But what many people are wondering about, and what many people have asked me to comment on, is a topic that I really have not tried to comment on very much. And it's the relationship of Donald Trump to American history, to the Catholic Church. He just announced that Vance is going to be his VP, and Vance is from the Appalachian South. His people came from Eastern Kentucky, and he was raised in Southern Ohio. And he is a recent convert to the Catholic Church, just as you and I are. And so my question for you is, how do we make sense of the increase of Catholicism among the leadership in the United States? I just watched a video today explaining that most of the members of the Supreme Court are Catholic. They may not be necessarily practicing Catholics across the board, but all of them have some experience with the Catholic Church, and actually more than a few of them are practicing Catholics. So what's going on? We live in a country that has a history of intense anti-Catholicism. So what is God doing from your perspective? Of course, this is just a loaded question, an intensely loaded question.
No. He sent me the facts. I've got all the information about what he's doing.
But I am interested to hear from your perspective, because I am of the opinion that the Catholic Church is one of the only ways that we can turn this country back to the purposes of its founding, because the Protestant denominations are splintering apart in tens of thousands of different opinions and denominations. You can't have that and have civilization at the same time. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on this history and on what's going on currently with Trump and the new VP.
Well, I think one of the main things that's missing from American culture now is an American identity. We used to have one. We used to be able to say, I'm an American. What does that mean? The Japanese think we're cowboys and the Russians hate us. That's pretty much what it meant. You know, we had a very strong sense of national pride and national identity. And, you know, I live in the South. I live in the Greenville, South Carolina area. And you would be surprised at just how many new Catholics are coming to the area. People are migrating here. And this is the South, like you said, one of the most staunchly anti-Catholic regions in all the US. Coincidentally, the most traditionally Catholic regions of the US, their numbers are dropping there. And then we see, okay, now we're starting to see some leadership in this country. You know, Biden, I still refer to him as a CNO, Catholic in name only, but he's there. We've got J.D. Vance, a recent Catholic convert. We've got the Supreme Court justices. And now we're seeing this rise and a push towards traditionalist Catholic values, even for people who are not Catholics. They don't even realize it yet, but a lot of their values are starting to line up with that of traditional Catholics. And I mean, the AP, the Associated Press, just put out what they thought was going to be a hit piece on Catholicism, talking about how people are returning to wearing veils in church, and the men are wearing three-piece suits to church, and there's a huge influx to Catholicism, as if it was a negative. But there is a gap with the American identity being almost non-existent. And then if we look at Catholicism, it lines up almost perfectly with what America was intended to be as far as the values and the morality structure of Catholicism. Even if you strip away all of the religious aspects of it, the main construct of its moral framework aligns perfectly with the intentions of our founding fathers. But there's still this sense of emptiness that people have been struggling with for decades. And they're longing to fill that hole. And we've always had this kind of what Flannery O'Connor would refer to as a debonair nihilism, where you're too sophisticated to be involved in this archaic thing such as faith. And they tried to fill it with all these material things, chasing the next big, issue to attack. We haven't been unified since September 12th, 2001. But this gap is it's only possible to fill that gap with God. And people are starting to find that. And then when they find that and they come into the Catholic Church and they find that objective universality of truth, it completes the picture of what was formerly filled by a superficial, although still needed, American identity. And I think that's why we're seeing such a pull toward it.
Well, Jeff, if I could pull things down to a little bit different direction, what are some of the reading materials in the books that you encountered that helped you understand the Catholic Church? And you're from South Carolina. Are you a native South Carolinian?
Well, I'll say yes. I was born in North Carolina, but didn't live there very long. I spent 30 of the 37 years, 25 of the 37 years here in South Carolina. And I'm in South Carolina. So
well, I am a native South Carolinian through and through, and I am very proud of my South Carolina heritage. When I started the Pipe Cottage, I did it in South Carolina, but we recently moved to Kentucky, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I wonder if you can speak to some of the literature that you encountered that may have convinced you that the Catholic Church is something that you should pay attention to. Were there any particular authors or books that you encountered that really persuaded you to give the Catholic Church a serious amount of attention?
there was one book in particular, and it's sitting here on my desk underneath this microphone now. Keep it here for reference. It's by George Weigel. He was a very popular Catholic author in the 90s and 80s, still popular now. It's called Letters to a Young Catholic. And it kind of takes this exploratory tour of the Catholic world, explaining while informing. And it's very difficult to even articulate why I enjoyed that so much. But I read through it 3 times already, and I usually only read it when I'm sitting in the adoration chapel. But more than that, it was actually a YouTube channel that really got me fired up. And it was Father Larry Richards. He's the parish priest at the, I think it's St. Joseph's in Erie, Pennsylvania. He had done a series of men's conferences and talks. I think the Rome Boys was one of the channels that he had ended up on. And his pull no punches episode or one video called "Be a Saint or Go to Hell" was very profound as far as unlocking kind of that missing piece. And it led me into, all right, let me go see what Thomas Aquinas has to say. Understanding the Summa is almost impossible. I know you say I'm a prolific and I'm a profound writer, but I was almost a 5th-year high school student and I dropped out of college. So I'm almost not educated, right? So
the best writers I have ever known would not tout a college education.
well,
So
it's because I don't have one to tout. I'll say that.
you are an absolutely wonderful writer.
I appreciate it.
So you mentioned YouTube, that a YouTube personality was important for your developing an understanding of the Catholic Church. I just got back from Steubenville, Ohio. We were doing I gave the keynote address at the Catholic Creators Conference, the first conference of that nature. And
Nice.
Scott Hahn was there, and I was there. Matt Fred gave a talk. And we were all discussing the ambivalence that we have towards social media. Most all of us would much rather live in a world before the advent of social media. Because, the social media is a double-edged sword. You've got good things that come from it, but you've also got a host of evil tendencies that can be produced from it by the same token. So, what do you see your role as a new Catholic, as a writer, as a person who is a content creator? What do you hope to accomplish through your work in these mediums?
Well, I've had a lot of people come to me before, and they always ask, how can I become a writer? Because they think that it's some glamorous job. It's not. I always wanted to be one because my first idea of what a writer was a picture of Hemingway drunk on a sailboat hunting sharks with a machine gun. I've yet to experience that in my writing career, although I'm still young, there's time. But the reason that I write is because I feel like I have something to say. And I've always felt that way, whether I was writing about Catholicism, whether I was writing about paganism, moral ambiguity, or masculinity, or whatever it was. I've always felt like I had something to say. And the only thing I've ever cared about is if someone reads what I have to say and they go, you know what, that helped me figure something out. I appreciate it. I'm from the school of entrepreneurs that learned you don't need a million screaming fans, you need a 1,000 fanatics.
You're
And
right.
that's not what I'm after either. I've got a moderately sized social media following that, yeah, I get some ad revenue stuff from the whole Elon Musk ad sharing thing, but I don't monetize what I do now. I've got a job. I work for a publishing house that supplies me all the clients, and I'm not doing any of this writing about Catholicism or my journey or my insights into Catholicism for money. I'm doing it because I feel like I have something to say. I'll be sitting there with my wife or my kids or hanging out in my pool, and something will strike me, and lean out, type it into my phone real quick so I remember it, because I won't be able to let that thought go and I'll be angry at myself if I let the little details of it slip. And then I come on my laptop the next morning and I write an article and I send it out to my Substack subscribers.
Good.
And it's a free Substack. But the
Yeah.
only thing I care about is that one person reads it and goes, I never thought of it that way. Just one. I don't care how many subscribe. Just one. I never thought about it that way, but that makes sense and it answers some questions for me. And if that just gets them one step closer to the truth of Catholicism, then that's enough for me.
Well, Jeff, you have, I think you've got a history of agnosticism or atheism. And one of those, you've got a history with those.
Mhm.
So why Christianity? Why did you choose Christianity above all the other religions that are offered to you through social media, through the internet? Why did you choose Christianity, even though you were raised in the South? And the South is known to be the Bible Belt. I have known many people who were raised in the South in the Bible Belt, and they don't know their butt from a hole in the ground when it comes to Scripture and Christianity. And these are not people who I would go to if I wanted to know more about the true teachings of Christ, because, well, for many reasons. But why did you choose Christianity above all the other options that were available to you, especially in this world where we have information in the palm of our hands through an iPhone 24 hours a day?
I didn't. I didn't choose it. I just answered what I felt like was a call from God. And I know that sounds hokey or whatever, but when I walked into what is now my home parish for my first actual mass, where I went in there looking for something because I felt like I was being pulled in through those doors. And I sat through the celebration of the mass and I listened to the homily from Father Christopher Smith, who was my parish priest. And then there was the call to communion. We came up, everybody got in line and walked up and knelt at the altar rails. And I'm reading on the music sheet, if you're not a confirmed Catholic, you have to cross your arms over your chest. Okay, I can do that. I got up and I got in line and I walked all the way up there and I knelt down on the altar rail. And then when Father Smith walked past me, he gave me a blessing. And when he gave me a blessing, he actually touched my forehead. You've seen a lot of priests, they'll just right over. But he touched my forehead and I heard his words. And I've never felt more emotional than that moment, except for when I received First Communion on June 22nd of this year. And I walked back, got back in the pew, and I sat down next to my wife, got back on the kneeler. I couldn't let that feeling go. It just, I don't know, it was like I was hooked. I experienced something that was not of this world. And it's not like I said, oh, if it sounds good, I'll choose this. I felt like I got chosen from the moment I walked in there. Like I'd been ignoring something my entire life.
So how is your life going to look different from this point forward? How are you going to wield the power of your Catholicism to benefit the life of you and your family and the life of the people who read your content?
Well, I don't know where it will end up. All I know is that if I feel God's calling me to do something, I'm going to try to do it. And I feel called to write. I feel called to explain theology the best an overzealous, undereducated redneck from South Carolina can in his writings, and try to align my will with whatever it is that God's will is for me. And whatever that is, because, people always worry about their vocations. People want to do something extraordinary. You feel called to serve God, but then you don't realize that as an accountant, as a plumber, as a writer, as an entrepreneur, as a dishwasher, as a cashier. You can serve God in those ways. It's not, hey, I'm going to join the Dominicans or the Franciscans or go live in a monastery or be a monk or be a deacon or be a priest. That's obviously out of the question for me. But there's ways that we all serve God unique to our strengths. And I know my strength is writing. And if I can try to deliver more people into the arms of God through the Catholic Church with my writing, then that's what I'm going to do. And if people reject it, then they reject it. But it's not like they're going to be any less prayed for it.
Well, sir, I'm so glad to hear it. It sounds like you've got things figured out and you're moving forward in a proper direction. So what would you say to people who are in the South who were raised to believe that Catholicism is not something we should pay attention to, but they think that they're being drawn to the Catholic Church? How would you speak to somebody who has to deal with these cultural differences and just people who are actually being drawn to the church? Because I just went through this myself, just as you did. Catholicism, if you're outside of New Orleans or Louisiana, you're outside of the Spanish areas of Florida, Catholicism in the South is not considered to be something that we should pay attention to. So what would you say to people who are thinking about Catholicism, who are Southerners, and who are concerned about the backlash from family members, etc.? Do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah. And after we get done with this interview here, I'm going to go and make it free. But a while back, I wrote an article. It was one of the first articles I put on my Substack. It's called The Cost of Conversion. Now, all the articles on my Substack are free unless they're older than 2 weeks. So you can subscribe for free, never pay a dime, donate a dime, nothing. But if you want the archive access, you got to, chip in at least $5 a month. But it's all completely optional. But I wrote this article called The Cost of Conversion. And there are costs that come with following Christ. Following Christ demands everything from us. I think about the story of Peter prior to him being martyred in Rome. There's a story of the Quo Vadis. Where are you going? Peter, in fear of being martyred, was trying to escape Rome. And you can still go to the gates where he was walking through. And there's a legend there around those gates in Rome that Christ appeared to him, walking past him into Rome. Peter asked him, where are you going? And Christ said, to Rome to be crucified again. And with that, he disappeared. But Peter turned around and went right back to face his fate, being martyred for the faith. Following Christ demands absolutely everything from us. And if a guy like Peter, who stumbled, getting out of the boat, couldn't stay afloat, when no ye of little faith right there in the Sea of Galilee, if he could try to flee from his own execution and martyrdom for the faith, if he could deny Christ 3 times before the rooster crowed at the crucifixion, but he still becomes a saint. He still becomes the holder of the keys of Christ's church on earth. Then how bad do you think you can screw up? How much suffering do you think you can endure? What kind of cross can you carry? And what sacrifice is worth it to you to follow Christ, who sacrificed every single thing for us? Because he'd do it all again right now. It's going to cost you things. Christ said himself, I did not come to bring peace, but I came to bring a sword that would divide father from son, mother from brother. Paraphrasing that, obviously. But it's because the truth is divisive. Not everyone's going to agree with it. Not everyone is going to want to follow Christ or be willing to sacrifice what they consider to be important earthly and temporal bonds here on this earth. But Christ gave everything for you. The question is, what are you willing to give for him?
Yes, sir. I believe that wholeheartedly. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful description. And I'm so thankful that you explained that. Well, so we are going to have to draw this to a close, but tell people if you are in fact a pipe smoker. Are you a pipe smoker, and do you enjoy the use of tobacco?
I am, in fact, a pipe smoker. I've got my nice Peterson Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde right here. I do enjoy it. I'm a big fan of Daybreak, which is something that George Bruno turned me on to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm also a sucker for good cigars. I've got a nice Mayflower here. I just finished a Rocky Patel yesterday, and I'm always a big fan of the Incensum Catholic cigars. I don't know if you've heard of them, but the Catholic Cigar Company, they've got some good sticks. So you know what? If it's tobacco, it's me.
That's good. Well, sir, we need to have another conversation sometime about your pipe and cigar use. But for the time being, I think we need to draw this to a close. I think that people are going to really, really enjoy hearing your testimony and your experience in joining the Catholic Church. Because as I say, most people who follow this channel are not very much interested in pipe and cigar talk. They are interested in conversations about Catholicism and the intellectual life. And so I think that this will be of benefit to many people. Jeff, it's such a privilege to have you on the channel today, and I thank you, sir, for your time.
I'm really glad you had me on. It was a great conversation, and I look forward to do it again anytime.
We will. Thank you, sir.